I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, teacher and podcaster, and you're about to start healing from your eating disorder and transforming your life and your relationship with food and body. I've worked in NHS and private practice supporting clients for 20 years, and I believe that recovery is possible for you. This podcast dives into expert interviews, evidence-based psychological approaches, and anecdotal tips from the therapy room from my years of experience. If you're wanting to heal your relationship with food, feel confident in your body, develop self-love and self-acceptance, and create a life of freedom and meaning, then this podcast is for you. Thank you for being here.
Today I have a guest on the show and I'm talking to Mindy Gorman-Plutzer, certified functional nutrition and lifestyle practitioner and eating psychology coach. Mindy's life experience and training inspired her to create a framework that combines functional nutrition, positive psychology, and mind-body science. Mindy is passionate about helping others recover from eating disorders and create a healthier lifestyle. Her approach tackles the root cause of the issue and emphasizes that how and why you eat is just as important as what you eat. In addition, Mindy is the author of The Freedom Promise, 7 Steps to Stop Fearing What Food Will Do to You and Start Embracing What It Can Do for You. In this episode, Mindy talks about her personal recovery journey, delving into the ups and downs of this road from being in a quasi-recovered place, doing recovery, to stepping into full recovery, being recovered, through deeper self-connection and self-empowerment. She explores how eating disorders become solutions to different traumas or stresses and the way that they can become a means of self-soothing, and with healing, other healthier coping strategies can be explored. This is an inspiring and encouraging episode as Mindy radiates passion, enthusiasm, and deep caring for her clients and people healing from eating disorders. It gives hope for recovery and regaining and taking back what was lost through the illness. I hope that you enjoy the episode. So before I delve into this week's episode, I just want to let you know that I have started writing on Substack. If you would like to read about eating disorders and disordered eating, if you want tips and skills from the therapy room, if you want to improve your relationship with food, I'm going to be writing twice a week on Substack. You can subscribe there and get my regular articles. And for every article I am writing, I'm also doing an audio to accompany it. So it's almost like a little extra free podcast. If you are interested to subscribe, do go to the link in the show notes and you can sign up, and hope to see some of you over there. Hi there, Mindy. Welcome back to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast.
Oh, thank you, Harriet. It's wonderful to see you and to be with your community again.
Oh, wonderful. So, Mindy, I know you've been on the podcast before, I think a couple of years ago. How are you doing today anyway? What's kind of going on where you are in the world? Just give us a little bit of insight.
Well, here I am just outside of New York City, the United States, and it is finally winter. We had such a mild autumn. We had days where the temperatures were Fahrenheit in the 70s and 80s. You could do the conversion to centigrade for me. I'm definitely numerically challenged. And now this morning, it was below zero. We are definitely in the throes of winter and the holiday season.
Okay. So it sounds like you're quite pleased about the cold weather. Is that right? Are you ready for winter or not?
I find it kind of refreshing. And I love the fact that I can stay indoors in my cozy office with the heat blasting. So I'm very happy.
Oh, that's good to hear. Well, thank you for giving us a bit of context. I think it's nice for the listeners to hear, really, because we have guests from all over the world. So thank you.
Yes.
For people that don't know you, could I get you to introduce yourself, please, to listeners?
Of course. So my name's Mindy Gorman-Plutzer. I am a board-certified integrative health coach, and I have additional certifications in eating psychology and functional nutrition and lifestyle coaching. I've dedicated the last 15 years to helping women really leave behind a relationship with food that's mired in fear and confusion. When I say fear, it becomes about fear regarding what food will do to them. And I hope to help them learn to embrace what food can do for them. I also have found that so many of the women that come to work with me really have a disconnect from their bodies. So it's very difficult to even become an intuitive eater if you don't have that intuition, if you don't have that connection to your body. A great deal of my work is dedicated to helping women to connect to the wisdom of their bodies. At the same time, looking at their story and honoring the context within which the behaviors evolve, because very often there's a very intense reason for that disconnect. So we explore all of that and reframe the messaging that came along with it.
Yeah, no, lovely. Thank you for that. And Mindy, you've had your sort of own journey, haven't you, with finding your own food freedom? And I think we talked a lot about that in our previous episode, which I will link to everyone in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to that. But would you like to just give us like a little overview for the listeners that don't know your story?
Yeah, of course. I was taught to diet in my early teens. It was, I think, a generational thing in my family, a loving family, but like most, it was complicated. My parents had their own body image issues, and it was drilled into me at a very early age that image was very important. And part of that image, one's appearance, and the value system that surrounded me was how important it was to be thin, very thin. Collectively, as a family, we would start every Monday with a diet. And you name the diet, we did it. There was the cabbage soup diet, Weight Watchers, the Stillman diet, the Atkins diet, and of course, there was calorie counting and calorie restriction, which comes with calorie counting. There were laxatives, there were diuretics, there were over-the-counter appetite suppressants. And these behaviors and these thought patterns, and really what morphed into a belief system, followed me not only through my teen years, but into my early adult years. I married young, had a daughter a year later, second daughter 2 years after that, and really never developed a strong sense of self. I was playing the game, I suppose. I was living the life that I thought that I was supposed to, but I never really identified what was happening deep within me. And because of that, I never connected to it. And I think that's why I can speak so strongly and empathetically to one who is disconnected from the wisdom of her body. By the time I hit my 30s, my daughters were approaching their teenage years. My body was getting smaller. Their bodies were getting larger. That's a whole nother story there. That could be another episode. And I decided it was time to really get help. I was hitting bottom. I saw my health was being affected. My relationships were being affected. My husband at the time, he blamed himself or resented me, vacillating back and forth between the two. So I reached out to the family doctor and I embarked on a recovery journey. This recovery journey was more about doing recovery. It took many years for me to understand what it meant to be recovered. And I'd love to talk about that difference. So here I was going for weekly weigh-ins, twice weekly therapy sessions, meetings with dietitians who had me on what I now look back an absurd meal plan. She actually told me, here I was, a woman in my late 30s, to wash my dinner down with 2 glasses of wine so that I would be relaxed. This was not going to be sustainable. I should also add that I was given prescriptions for anti-anxiety drugs and antidepressants. Here I was, the good little girl, following all the rules, doing what I was supposed to be doing. Fast forward into my 40s, things were stable, they were calm. And my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic melanoma. And the prognosis was daunting. We had 21 months of hell, if I can be honest. And he passed in August of 2004. And that dragged me to the bottom again. I was enshrined in darkness. And I realized at that point, because I had dabbled in recovery, that I had a choice. I could taste, so to speak, what life was like on the other side. And I had daughters that loved me, family and friends that loved me. My oldest daughter had been married. I had hopes of becoming a grandmother and an active grandmother. And I knew that being as emotionally bankrupt as I was, emotionally, spiritually, and physically bankrupt as I was never going to be the woman that I needed to be, or I wanted to be, or that my daughters could be proud of. I really embarked on a journey of self-discovery. And I contemplated my demons, and I contemplated my story, and I contemplated all the complications of that story and all the messaging that I had received. And I slowly started to reframe. And I realized that what was missing, that was keeping me distant from my body, was that I wasn't feeling empowered. The doctor visits telling me what to eat, what I needed to weigh. And then the therapist telling me what I needed to feel, the dietitian telling me what I needed to eat. No one was even asking me what it was that I was truly hungry for. And what I was truly hungry for was the connection to not only the woman that I was and wanted to be, but the little girl that never got what she needed. So this journey of self-discovery took me back to school in my mid-50s. First was the health coaching certification, then the eating psychology, which I just fell in love with, because what that teaches you is who you are as an eater. You learn to question why you eat, how you eat, when you eat. And when those three issues are examined deeply, fully, vulnerability, the what you eat becomes easier, less of a challenge, because you have that connection and that sense of empowerment. But there was one thing missing for me, and that was my physical health. The years of laxative abuse, the years of restricting, the stress that came with it mentally, and the stress that I was putting on my body with all those behaviors really took its toll on my gut. But the traditional treatment therapies weren't addressing that at the time. The idea of all foods fit, that you've got to commit to eating all foods in order to fully commit to recovery, was not going to work for me because my gut was so out of balance. Learning about functional medicine, where all systems are connected, every body is unique and everything matters, really helped me develop a program where we honor not only the physiology, but the psychology, and to understand that there is a biological component to eating disorders and disordered eating.
Yeah, well, thank you for talking us through your story again, Mindy. Hearing it again, actually, just very, very touching. And I think you're someone that has really walked the walk, haven't you? And you've been to some very dark places and done that sort of more, I guess what we call in the UK, a bit more kind of quasi recovered place, where you were doing recovery, weren't you? But from the external, but that was a very different thing to actually when you really became empowered and much more connected with yourself and you actually became recovered.
Yeah, for me, the difference had to do really with motivation and mindset. When you are a perfectionistic character, when it's very important for you to be the good girl, other people's opinions of you matter, it's very easy to follow the rules and do the right thing because you're being told to, and you're people pleasing your practitioners, you're people pleasing your treatment team. You want to show up and do the right thing. Being recovered is that shift in mindset. It's understanding that it's not about the food. It's not about all of the talk. It's about walking the walk. I tell a story in my book about recovery from an eating disorder, lifting like a cloud, and how it differs from recovery from other addictions, where you might have a date of your last drink or your last drug, or when you cut up your credit cards, or the last time you were in a gambling casino. But for me, the experience of recovery was very different. It was very gradual. For example, I would leave the house in the morning, and then after I was gone, I realized I didn't spend 10 minutes examining the size of my body in the mirror. Or another time where I was out for lunch and I ordered a salad and I forgot to ask for the dressing on the side. The salad came dressed and I ate it anyway. That's being recovered. That is being free in your soul. That is connecting to the deepest part of you and truly creating the life that you want for yourself.
So when people come to you, and I guess there's a lot of often ambivalence about recovery, or maybe they've experienced that external being told what to do. They've been the kind of pleasing person, haven't they? And in a way, they're coming to you still with a lot of ambivalence, not really understanding about connection and empowerment. How do you start them off to kind of really work with that ambivalence and support them with motivation?
We start off with story. I've learned that everybody has a food story. And I help my clients to understand that our very first relationship with being nurtured, with being held, with being seen, understood, has to do with being fed, right? It's the first time we experience that nurturing and nourishment. And at that time, as humans, we have no sense of ego, no sense of autonomy. We're totally dependent on the people responsible for our care and feeding. And then we start to develop feelings and we start to develop beliefs. And those beliefs become thoughts. And life might always not be so simple as it was when there was no ego. And we might have to figure out that the world that we're finding ourselves in needs a little more negotiation. Maybe we don't feel safe in that world. But the brain remembers, eat, feel better. And that's why food is such a source of comfort. Funny word, because it doesn't end up being so comfortable. But what's important to understand from that, and this is what I tell my clients right off the bat, that the eating disorder, the disordered eating behaviors, and I'd love to talk about the differences, are not the problem. You're not broken. They started out as a solution, and most often a beautiful, brilliant solution. So right away, we take away the shame. I'm very eager and open to share a little bit of my story that I find helpful, depending on who's sitting with me. And we take it from there. And then their food story starts to unfold. And I ask questions, a lot of questions. I happen to find parts of that story that can be easily reframed. So we really start out by clearing the clutter, eliminating a lot of the toxic beliefs and thoughts that basically are consuming and filling up all the space in my client's head. And then I go to, of course, food. Now, if I'm sitting with somebody who's been restricting, I realize that their brain is starved. In some cases, I have to adopt the policy of first we eat, then we talk. But what they're eating is very important because we don't want a situation where it's just about calories. I want to respect gut health. I want to respect digestion, any imbalances that might be there. And I want to feed the brain so that my client is really physically able and cognitively able to converse with me and do the work. So there's a challenge there. But when I give my client permission to eat what foods make her feel best, it's a game changer because I'm not telling her what to eat. We're starting out by saying, let's journal. Let's take some information just for information purposes. Let me know what you're eating, how you feel physically and emotionally, and we take it from there. It's not a one size fits all. It's not an all foods fit. It's very bio-individual, very individualized. And there's a lot of nuance in recovery because so often it's not about the food. It's showing up in the food, but it's more tied to self-worth.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? I mean, I don't think I've ever met anyone with an eating disorder or disordered eating that has really robust self-worth. Often people don't feel good enough, do they, underneath?
And Harriet, isn't that lack of self-worth tied to safety? Could be physically safe, but emotionally and psychologically safe in this world.
I think it all links up with you sort of talking there about you go through a client's kind of story and, you know, their history, and you're looking at the early relationship with food, I guess, as well, all the things that happen perhaps in their family and in their life. And yeah, often I guess our clients they haven't felt safe, have they? And food has been the one thing, like you're saying, in a way, it's been the solution, the kind of good coping strategy in a way that has really kind of kept them safe and protected them. But obviously, it's not so great to be using that as an adult, is it?
No. And I think there's a fine line between eating in response to an emotionally driven situation that so many of us do, even healthy eaters. And when I say people, healthy eaters, I mean people that have a healthy relationship with food, sometimes find themselves eating when they're not hungry. The difference is that they're not eating in an effort so as not to feel emotion.
Mm, yeah.
They're not using food to check out, or they're not relying on a lack of food to define who they are.
Yeah, no, sure. So it's kind of, when you're talking there, it's kind of where it becomes more disordered, isn't it? It's where someone's really like numbing or dissociating or distracting consciously or unconsciously, often unconsciously, aren't they, through food? Whereas, yeah, I mean, absolutely right. I just think before I came on this call, I had some chocolate. I wasn't actually hungry. I just enjoyed it.
Exactly.
But, yeah. But do you want to say a bit more about disordered eating, eating disorders, and your definition perspective on those?
Yeah. Clinically, disordered eating would be defined as eating disorder behavior to a lesser degree, restricting, overeating, possibly purging. And the purging could be overexercising. And to a lesser degree, of course, the physical consequences would be to a lesser degree. We're not talking about slow heart rates. We're not talking about metabolic issues. We're not talking about blood sugar disturbances. But from my experience clinically, from the women I work with, and I love my clients, I have to say, I feel so blessed. But what I've learned is that disordered eating, I define it as misguided behavior that is driven by misinformation. And there is so much information out there today. Eat this, don't eat that. Even the anti-diet community has caused some problems in this area because people are still connected to their thoughts and not the wisdom of their bodies. Somebody wrote to me the other day telling me that someone told her she should stop eating meat because it's very bad for her rheumatoid arthritis. But this is a woman that needs to put weight on. She said, but I have to eat meat because it's the only thing that helps me gain weight. I explained to her, everybody is different. Everybody's body responds differently to the food they're eating. And she should really think about what's working best for her. I put her in touch with a colleague of mine who eats a carnivore diet and swears by it for taking care of inflammation. So here you go. I think nutrition science can create a different kind of eating disorder.
Yeah, and I think it's very true, isn't it? I think there is so much nuance, isn't there? I mean, I like what you're saying in a way, like you're always coming back to the individual and helping them to connect with themselves and to notice how is food making them feel and to be making those empowered choices and reflecting. And that is slightly different with everyone, isn't it? And if you're living with a chronic illness, or like you're saying as well, when you'd had years of kind of perhaps damage to your gut from dieting, taking laxatives, etc., the more conventional treatment, I guess, wasn't really going to work for you in the same way, whereas maybe for someone else that could be okay. But I guess there's just so much nuance, isn't there, that needs to be taken into account?
So much nuance. And then it's not only about the nutrition. We talk also about, we want to get our clients from deficiency to sufficiency, but how are they sleeping? How are they moving? Are they moving appropriately for where their body is at the time? What are their relationships like? How well hydrated are they? We've got to look at the whole person and the whole psyche and hopefully get a glimpse into the soul, because that's truly, in my belief, one's higher power.
Time for a short advertisement break. Are you a counsellor, dietitian, therapist, nutritionist, personal trainer, or other mental health professional Are you seeing increasing numbers of your clients struggling with eating disorders and disordered eating? And are you keen to learn skills and strategies and build confidence in working with your clients who struggle with these issues? We know that increasing numbers of people are struggling with eating disorders, and we know that 85% of people with eating disorders are not underweight, and this means that many eating disorder symptoms are hidden. The Good Childhood Report in 2021 highlights appearance as a leading cause of unhappiness among young people and indicates that appearance concerns are increasing year upon year. So join my Eating Disorders Training Day on Zoom, face-to-face or self-paced online. It will give you a really good understanding about the different types of eating disorders, including anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder and OSFED, with an introduction to RFED and neurodiversity and eating disorders. You'll explore typical causes of eating disorders and understand how to create a psychological formulation for your client. And this will be brought to you by relating to client examples. I will take you through them, my specific knowledge, skills and techniques, which can be used when supporting clients with eating disorders. You will get a full comprehensive training manual and access to the recording of the training afterwards and a full online version of the course. If you want to sign up, please go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk, and you might also be interested in my body image training for professionals too.
I'm so with you. I think in just mainstream culture, health has been so reduced down to nutrition and exercise through quite a distorted lens, hasn't it? And we forget about these things like sleep and healthy movement and connection and spirituality and all the things, really. I think you make a really good point, actually, about including all of these things in a very holistic way when you're working with a person.
I think most people who have eating challenges or weight challenges feel that once they get their relationship with food in order, their life will improve. When it's the opposite is true. Once they get their relationship to themselves improved, everything else will be in better balance. Our relationship to ourselves is reflected in our relationship to everything else that we do.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? If we neglect that, really, we're just kind of going to be functioning in a dysfunctional way in all areas, aren't we? So can you say a bit more about that kind of, Mindy, in terms of really supporting people to begin to connect more with themselves? Like you've talked already a little bit about with the food and keeping a journal and recording and reflecting and noticing. What other things do you encourage your clients to do to begin to develop that stronger connection with themselves?
Well, we start with breath work. I'm a big believer in breath work and stimulating the polyvagus nerve, which for those listening that don't know, it's the largest nerve in the body. It goes from the brain, innervates every organ through digestion. And when the vagus nerve is activated, we are in a parasympathetic rest and digest or rest and heal state, as opposed to the sympathetic, which is the fight, flight, or freeze state. And today's world, and if any of our listeners are in a struggle with their bodies and with how they're feeding themselves and how they think about food, they're most likely in that sympathetic state. With my clients, I talk about slowing down. I help them to see that how they're eating is as important as why, when, and what. If they're eating in a stress state, thinking to themselves, well, I shouldn't be eating this, or is this okay? Then they're not even digesting. And the stress alone will throw the gut bacteria out of balance. It's the whole picture. Again, we track sleep if I feel it's necessary to track it. And there are clients that are opposed to tracking, and I understand that. They feel it makes them a little more obsessed, or perhaps that I'm judging. I take it as it comes and make appropriate suggestions. Just paying attention, making sure you're sitting down while you're eating, setting a place for yourself, inviting yourself to the table as an honored guest.
Yeah, creating some ceremony, isn't it, around eating actually almost. And like you're saying, slowing down. And I think it's something just in our fast-paced society, isn't it, where many people are just consistently in their sort of sympathetic nervous system response. Sadly, I think even many people without eating disorders or disordered eating, they're just kind of eating, aren't they, at the screen, or they're not stopping, or just not having regular meal times, or it's a real challenge, isn't it? I think for clients when we're saying this out loud, and it sounds like quite a simple step, but it's actually very challenging, isn't it, for people to slow down and stop and make that time.
Exactly. For that person, I will suggest that they take 3 deep cleansing breaths when they sit down to enjoy the meal. And very often, clients I work with, takes years for them to enjoy a meal. I've been working with one particular client, comes to mind, for almost 3 years now, and she was at a point where she used the word repulsed. She was repulsed by a plate that was covered with a full-size meal. And it took a while, but I helped her see that it wasn't the food that was repulsing her, it was parts of her life that she found repulsive. And she's made unbelievable progress in all areas of her life, just by those little tweaks, little truths. And by letting go of the beliefs that became thoughts. Thoughts are not facts. And this is the nuance that comes out in a coaching session. After we address clearing the clutter, moving from deficiency to sufficiency, we create a toolbox of strategies and tips and proper thoughts that work. And we also make note of what doesn't work.
Sure. So the client's almost kind of creating that toolbox in collaboration through the coaching. So they're kind of like, is that often through sort of journaling and writing things down, having reading, things to listen to? I guess it's a combination, is it, of many different things that you might use?
Exactly. And helping them to understand that it's okay to be vulnerable. Again, I can't repeat often enough that the eating challenges are a solution, not a problem. They are not broken. They are not of any less value. And that there is limitless possibility out there of what life can look like when you stop obsessing on weight and the size of your body.
Yeah, so you're really holding the hope, aren't you, for the bigger, brighter life, actually, for your clients? Because I think sometimes their head's been so down the rabbit hole of weight and shape and everything, isn't it? You just can't see the sky, can you, and the possibilities. You're just so far down the rabbit hole.
Exactly. And there are so many rabbit holes out there to go down, offering us the opportunity to go down them these days. So many. What people are posting for their own benefit commercially. And then you've got influencers who are monetizing the fact that they're pushing products. And you don't know whether they've used them or not. You don't know whether or not they're safe. There's a lot going on out there that we have to navigate. And it's very easy to want to take control, but we have to be careful that we don't do it in such a way that whatever it is we're depending on isn't controlling us.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise, isn't there? And it's truly challenging when we're trying to become more connected with ourselves and more empowered, not to be just seduced and pulled sideways by all of these different influences. And I guess particularly when you haven't got that strong sense of self-trust, you're kind of looking outside, aren't you, for the answer in a way, for the quick fix, for some magical solution.
Absolutely. That's why I say the greatest, highest power is the one that's in our deepest sense of self. Because if we're constantly relying on something outside of ourselves for validation or to feel empowered, then in my mind, it's no different than depending on the number on the scale to determine what you're worth that day.
Yeah, no, it's so true, isn't it? I think whenever we outsource our worth and our decision making to anything outside, really, and lose that connection with the soul, it's a very dangerous place, isn't it?
Yeah, which is why the very first step of my 7-step framework is find your enough.
So say a little bit more about the 7-step framework, because I'm guessing there'll be some people listening today that might be interested in your approach and wanting to work with you. So just say a little bit more about that.
The 7-step framework to stop fearing what food will do to you and start embracing what can do for you really came about very organically. And it's an acronym for freedom. Step 1 is find your enough. Step 2, rest and digest. That talks about the science of stress, what thoughts do to stress, as well as behaviors do to stress on our bodies. Eat when you're hungry, stop when you're not. Difference between physical hunger and emotional hunger. And even there's something called toxic hunger, which is basically when you have a huge reliance on ultra processed foods. Then we have eat mindfully. Do something every day to make your body feel alive. Only eat whole foods as often as you can, and make sure you surround yourself with what truly nourishes, because what truly nourishes us is not found in the kitchen. So those are the 7 steps. And my work, depending on the client I'm working with, we move through the steps because one really leads to the other. With the first step, find your enough, face your feelings, feel the love. It might be the first step, but it's the ultimate goal.
Oh. Yeah, well, thank you for sort of talking us through. I guess as well, we'll put a link in the show notes for anyone who wants to find out a bit more and maybe sign up for one of your programs or to work with you.
I work individually, but I also offer self-study experiences. The 7-step program, it's 8 modules, Stop Fearing Food, an alternative approach to say goodbye to disordered eating for good. That comes with a workbook. It comes with plenty of food for thought, but it also comes with 4 individual sessions with me and 1 year of group support from the day you enroll. So it's really quite a program. And it's really a glimpse into my recovery, because every module starts with a story of my own insanity and what it was like for me and how I morphed out of it.
Sure. That sounds very inspiring, actually, because it's very much a heart-led program, isn't it? Which has been inspired from your kind of rock bottom, pain to purpose kind of thing. So
exactly. It's extremely heartfelt. And I hope to be a contributor to changing the way we do traditional eating disorder recovery. Yes, it's important to find food freedom and be happy eating all foods, but it's more important to choose what really honors you. Why would you choose to eat something that didn't make you feel fabulous? And choosing not to do so is not restricting. It's making an empowered choice.
Yeah. Again, there's a lot of nuance, isn't there? What I really like about everything you're saying is about coming back to listening to yourself, isn't it? And your connection and really noticing how things make you feel, not just with food, but with your whole interaction with the world, your environment, really coming back to yourself and finding that self-trust and that self-wisdom.
And having said all that, I don't want to dishonor the woman who has disconnected from her body for very legitimate reasons due to trauma. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be respected and listened to. And this is an instance where we really need to meet our clients where they are.
Yeah, and I think it's such an important point, isn't it, actually? Because if food is the one thing that just has really kept you safe through some really difficult, traumatic times, be very destabilizing and difficult to let that go as well. You know, there's understandable, real ambivalence there, isn't it? And a lot of it is quite unconscious as well. The body keeps the score, I guess, doesn't it?
As you're saying, who will I be without these behaviors that have protected me for so long?
Yeah.
And that's why one cannot do this alone. They need help. They need a team. They need somebody to meet with them in between the doctor's visits, in between the therapy visits. They need to know that they are valued and valuable and that they're not broken. They just need to rewrite their story.
Yeah, it's so true. So, Mindy, do you have any kind of final words of wisdom for people? Because I know we could talk forever, really, but I guess for anyone listening who's just feeling a bit lost and stuck and a bit hopeless, what would you sort of say to them?
I would say you are enough. I would say that the challenges you have with eating are not the problem. You're not broken. They're a brilliant solution. But perhaps these behaviors have brought consequences and problems. there's a way out. I promise. Imagine the possibilities of feeling freedom in your body and in your mind and in your soul and at the table.
Thank you for that. And Mindy, where can people find you? And obviously we'll put the links in the show notes, but if people want to check you out on social media or go to your website, where are the best places?
My website is thefreedompromise.com. Instagram, I'm at The Freedom Promise. LinkedIn, Mindy Gorman-Plutzer. And Facebook is The Freedom Promise as well. From my website, you can sign up for my newsletter. Will not bombard your inbox, I promise. It just comes out once a month. And then sometimes I might send out special promotions and offers for great things that colleagues are doing.
Okay, wonderful. We should make sure all the links go in the show notes. So thank you so much. Mindy, I'd just like to really thank you for coming back on the podcast again. Love talking to you. And I think just very inspirational, really. Just your heart and your passion are so in your work. And I think it radiates out of you. It's very inspiring and encouraging for me to speak to you and for all the listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Harriet. And thank you for the work you're doing.
So I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did, and do go and check out all of Mindy's details in the show notes. If you're not following me already on Instagram, do seek me out, the Eating Disorder Therapist _. For further support with your relationship with food, do go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. If you're interested in reading articles about eating disorders, you might want to visit my Substack. Link is in the show notes. And if you enjoy this podcast, I would be so grateful if you'd follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.